everybody. What's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Holly Mays. Listen, I appreciate you guys for joining me on this edition of Daily Manna. A lot is going on. Let me tell you, a lot is going on, and we want to really talk about it. We want to deal with it today, um, and we really want to make sure that we address some issues today. Bishop Harper, God bless you, sir. Love what you're doing in the community, man. Love what you're doing, man. Um, but man, we're going to really talk about it today. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about surviving in a divided society. Uh, Today's topic is surviving in a divided society, and it is definitely a divided society, whether we want to admit it or not. It is definitely a divided society. Uh, a lot of things are going on, and a lot of feelings and emotions have been dropped in the atmosphere. And you know, I try to be the preacher at all times. I really do. I try to be the preacher at all times. And sometimes I say, I get back into that preacher mode and say, hey, let's just pray for everybody. But my question, and we have some preachers on the line that's going to be looking at this, is what happens when, is there a time to pray and a time not to pray and just act? That's a question I just want to throw out there. Is there a time where you're not praying, it's just time for action? And because of what's going on, because of the things that we're dealing with in our city, in our nation, is this more of an action protocol? Is this more of a time where we have to truly say, well, you know what, enough is enough, and I'm not necessarily in a praying mood. Now, don't get me twisted. I'm not sitting up here saying prayer doesn't work. I'm not saying that. But the first thing I want to talk about on the first half of this show is is there such a thing as action rather than prayer? Okay, because we obviously understand that we're living in a divided society. I think there's not one black man, black woman that doesn't feel like the society is not together. It's divided, and whether that's because of anger, whether that's because of misunderstanding, whatever the case may be, obviously, I believe that there is a natural and visible division. And the biggest question is during that division, what's the answer? I think that's really where we need to be at this point in time is what's the answer? Like, I get protests, and I know somebody gonna say I'm being a pessimistic, and I'm this, but y'all know me by now. But exactly, is protesting and rioting, is that the answer? I'm really trying to figure out, what is the strategy and the system behind getting to the table, so that we could have that conversation, so that we could really sit down and say, okay, wait, hold on. These are the strategies and structures behind getting this thing back on track. Because when I look at my son and I look at my daughter, I have to be cognizant of the fact that one day I'm not going to be here and they have to pick up the slack. And what we do today will determine how they operate in the future. And I think sometimes we miss that. And we get so caught up in the emotion. And that's why I was saying, well, this is not really always a prayer time. This may not be one of those things where you're saying, oh, okay, well, we're going to pray, pray, pray. Well, I'm sure that we've prayed and God has heard us and we trust that God is moving. So we don't have to pray that same prayer of freedom anymore, because God is already on the case. God, that's just the type of God we have. So now, after prayer, after you've been on your knees for 20 hours and you've done this and you've done that, now what do we do? Okay, protesting, to me, protesting is a voice, but it's not an action. It's a voice, it's not an action, because protesting will bring awareness, but it doesn't create solution. And once again, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not knocking protesting. I'm not knocking walking and speaking your case and saying how you feel and talking about what you want to do and what the other person is doing. But I remember when I was younger, and my mom used to, me and my cousins, I didn't have any brothers, but me and my cousins, we used to get into all kinds of stuff. And my cousin would be like, my mom would be like, okay, well, who did this? Okay, who did this? And each one of us would be like, well, he did it. And the other one would be like, well, he did it. And he started it. Everybody's blaming everybody. But my mom never really wanted to know, really like, yeah, I get it. All of y'all are guilty. We know that you're guilty. Okay, how do we keep this from happening again? Because if you touched the stove or you grabbed a knife, he could have been stabbed or he could have been burnt or whatever the case may be. I need to know who did this so that we can work on a strategy and action plan to make sure that this doesn't happen again, to make sure in the future we have a better mechanism or a better group of mechanics to be able to ward against this, so there's not any adverse actions with this. So I guess that's really my biggest question is, okay, what's the strategy? I hear people telling me the problem, but what's the strategy? And once again, I'm not oblivious to racism. As a matter of fact, when we do our talk show on Monday, we're going to be talking about racism, and we're going to be having some guests in here. But I want to know what the strategy is. I haven't heard or I haven't seen, and maybe I missed it, so if I did, please let me know. I haven't seen someone lay out an ordinance or a strategy as to how in the world can we actually stop this? How can we fix this? You can't tell me protesting and burning down stuff and getting ready to shoot the police. That can't solve police brutality. Because watch this, whether we know it or not, for every police officer that gets beat up and gets fired, there's 60 more coming through the academy, unfortunately. I'm just saying. So we have to develop a strategy. I mean, what are we taking to the police chief? What are we taking to the constables or the sheriff's departments? And once again, I'm not saying that hasn't been done. Okay, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that has not been done. I just would like a citywide, I guess, standard or I guess presentation as to what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again, or to make sure that we are not killing our own self. Because watch this now. If we kill a cop, I want you to look at this for a second. If we kill a cop and that cop is black, did we help or hurt our cause just because they wear the uniform? You understand what I'm saying? We don't want to condone black on black crime. We're not trying to push black on black crime. And I don't care how you look at it. If you go and destroy a police officer or you shoot a police officer and that police officer is black, that's black on black crime. Regardless to the uniform, because that might have been a perfectly good cop, but you're looping them in with the association that they're a part of. I'm a Mason, okay? And you can't tell me that just because my organization did something bad, I'm a bad person. You see what I'm saying? We got to make sure that we're not looping in good human beings with an organizational structure and strategy. You understand what I'm saying? And just because, watch this, just because a person does something bad that is a part of an organization doesn't mean the organization is bad. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that about the police department, but I want you to understand where I'm going with this. So we have to be more rational. Okay, that's all I'm saying. We have to be a little bit more rational. We have to be a little bit more strategic about how we're going about this. And I think some of our leaders are just leaving it up in the open. Hey, let's just get together and let's just talk about how mad we are and how pissed off we are and how we're not going to stand for this. I get that. But let's come together and say, okay, listen, let's go to the police station. Let's go to the police department, the marshal's department. Let's go to our local government. Let's go to Mr. Eric Johnson. Let's go to those guys and let's say, hey, listen, here is a strategy that we have, that me and a group of leaders have come up with. And we're saying, can we implement this strategy? And that strategy involves training. That strategy involves rules of engagement, because most police officers are ex-military. So they understand rules of engagement. Most law enforcement people, most governmental officials are ex-military. So you understand the Geneva Code, the Geneva Convention. You understand rules of engagement. You understand, reduce the threat to the least form. You understand that. You don't execute the threat unless you're in war. So you understand escalation rules. So why not come together and let's build a strategy to help understand and help get past and help learn, because maybe they don't know, because I don't know if the police officers, they may understand rules of engagement, but they don't understand escalation theory. Because watch this, rules of engagement means you're engaging in a target that is actually re-engaging back at you. So that's where rules of engagement come in, and I think we're misunderstanding that. If I'm doing rules of engagement, you got to understand that target is engaging in me, whether they're verbally engaging in me, whether they're physically engaging in me, whatever the case may be. But I'm operating based on what the threat is actually doing to me. But if there is no threat, then you can't operate in rules of engagement, and I think that's where the police department is getting this wrong, and that's where we're getting it wrong when we're trying to discuss. Wait, hold on, why are these guys doing that? Because they're exercising rules of engagement when there is no engagement. If you go a routine traffic stop, you should not be operating in rules of engagement. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that's the biggest problem. The police department has not been trained well enough on when to operate in rules of engagement and when to deal with escalation strategies. Escalation strategies mean that, hey, I'm going from a traffic stop to okay, you made a movement, to something looks suspicious, to okay, now there's interaction. That's escalation. Things escalate. You can't deal with rules of engagement when there is no escalation procedure. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that's the problem, and we need to train our officers. We need to train our people the difference between the two. Guns, tasers, batons, those are rules of engagement equipment, pieces of equipment. They're not escalation equipment. A riot and a protest does not deal with rules of engagement, because you're okay. You have the freedom to protest. Okay? You have the freedom to protest. So if a person is protesting, they rules of engagement, you shouldn't see police officers with shields and helmets and guns out, and you shouldn't see that, because those are rules of engagement procedures. And the problem is no one's talking about the actual procedures. We're talking about the result of the procedure. We're not talking about the procedure itself. And that's why, it's hard to survive in this divided system, because the system is training improperly. And that's the problem. They're training improperly. You're training for something that has no grounds. You don't train a police officer for rules of engagement. They're not at war. You're not at war with your citizens. So rules of engagement are not even necessary. You are a peace officer, which key word is peace. You keep the peace. You can't keep the peace operating in rules of engagement, because that means that you came into a peaceful situation engaged. That means psychologically you are engaged. That means physically you are engaged. Mechanically you are engaged. Training-wise you are engaged. So therefore you have already surpassed your foundational duty, which is to keep the peace. And that's why we're having this issue. And we have to make our police chief, our constable chief, our marshal chief, our sheriff, we got to make them aware. Wait, hold on. I think we have the definite, because they never were in the military. Most of those police chiefs, they were never in the military. Miss Hall, I don't believe she was in the military. So she doesn't adequately understand rules of engagement. And you may have someone who's been out of, let me explain this as well. If you've been out of the military for over 10 years, you don't know how to operate within rules of engagement anymore. Okay? You may remember about rules of engagement, but operating in rules of engagement is different. So if you have someone that's training police officers over rules of engagement, but have never had to participate in the last 10 to 15 years in rules of engagement, your training is outdated at best. Okay? Your training is outdated. So we're teaching them outdated information. And watch this. You cannot watch this now, you cannot give military training to someone who has not been trained in the military. You can't take a young man straight out of high school and say, I'm going to teach you military tactics, and send them on the streets of a community with military tactics, and you never taught them how to operate within tactics of being on the street. You can't do that. You're teaching them how to operate from a military standpoint in a peaceful community environment. That's why y'all are called officers of the peace. Peace officers. Your first objective is to keep the peace. It's funny to me how police officers always find a way to keep the peace with white folks that are doing the most heinous of crimes, but they got a problem with keeping the peace with black folks who ain't doing nothing. No one thinks that's strange, and we do a lot of talking. That's why the society is divided. And it's hard to survive in a divided society because guess what? We're not on the same playing field or the same psychological link as it pertains to how we operate. We're just not. We got a group over here that's saying fight the power. Then we got a group over here saying protect the police. Then you got a group over here that's saying, hey, pray about it and trust in God. Then we're divided as a society on how to deal with the issues in the society. No one's on the same page. You got the militant group over here to say, hey, we ain't going to back down. If we need to bring guns, we'll bring guns. Like this is 1952 and 1960, and they water hosing everybody. Listen, I'm pro-black as they come. Trust me, because I live with a pro-black woman. Through and through, trust me. And I'm not a fan of our president. So let me just say that straight. And I'm not all that particular. As much as I love my friends and family members that are in the police department, listen, I do not agree with the systematic, oppressive system and organization that our police department and local and national government has become. But I do understand one to two things. The first thing I understand is that we're divided to where we can't come together and reach a common goal. We got too many things that are dividing us. We got hate. Listen to what I'm saying. We got hate dividing us. We got lack of understanding dividing us. And we got lack of training dividing us. I'm going to say it again. We got hate dividing us. We got lack of training dividing us. And listen, we got people who are just not on the same page. And because we are not on the same page, let me help you with this. Because we are not on the same page, people are operating roguely. Okay? They're operating roguely. And when you have people operating roguely, then you're going to have rogue type behavior to happen. What do I mean by that? If you got people who have to rely on their training and their training is not sufficient enough, then guess what? They're left to their own devices. That's why I don't understand why the police department, constable department, sheriff's departments are some of the least trained military operating people in our city. I don't understand that. And the only reason I say they're military operating because you're operating in the rules of engagement. Whenever you operate in rules of engagement, if I got military folk on here, they'll tell you, then you must be dealing with something that is engaging you. But if you are a peace officer, you should be trained to operate in peace, not rules of engagement. You understand what I'm saying? And that's the breakdown in training. That's the breakdown right there. People should not be scared of someone called a peace officer. I'm just being honest with you. You can't tell me as a civil rights leader a person is supposed to have a peaceful protest, but yet those that were trained to serve as peace officers don't have to have a peaceful assembly. They don't have to have a peaceful engagement process. They don't have to have a peaceful organization. They don't have to have a peaceful transition. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that one has to operate in peace and the other one doesn't. We need to do Morris-Briggs test. That's another reason why the society is divided. Because we don't know the psychological state of the ones that we give authority to. We have no idea who we're giving authority to. Why is it that the police department don't do Morris-Briggs test? Why is it that the sheriff department, the state troopers, why is it that your SWAT team doesn't have a Morris-Briggs test on file? I'm just asking. That's a psychological test that will let someone know how this person is thinking. How many people in the police, watch this now, how many people in the police department are still dealing with PTSD? I'm trying to ask this question. Does our police chief know how many PTSD-induced people she has on her staff? How many people still go to bed at night thinking of war and they wake up trying to enact what they dreamed? I'm asking a question. These are the questions that we need to be asking. These are the things that we need to be sitting down asking. I don't want to ask you, how did that man get set free? I need to know how he got hired. Since you say that nobody can be on the police department with felonies, since you say can't nobody be on the police department with a traffic ticket, since you say you put all these stringent things on the police department and the constable department, and nobody can do this, but yet a government official, all they got to do is have a high school diploma. This is the criteria that you put before our nation's leaders. That's retarded. Excuse me, honey. I know you don't like me saying that, and I apologize if my sister-in-law is listening, but that is crazy. That is psychologically crazy. You mean to tell me that my police officer, a guy you done gave a gun and an authority, a city official badge to, does not have to have a college education, does not have to take a psychological evaluation? Are you crazy? That is crazy. You telling me our president does not have to take a Morris-Briggs test? You're telling me our state senator does not have to take a psychological evaluation? Is that what you're telling me? But yet I can go work at Walmart and they make me take a Morris-Briggs test. I can go work at your local gyms and I got to do a background check and a polygraph test. And none of these jobs pay over $30,000 a year. But we can pay our local government or our national government or our international government six figures with no qualifications, with no criteria, no requirements. Does that make sense? That's why we have a divided city. That's why we're having issues. That's why we have problems, because no one wants to deal with the root cause of it. I need to know where your dad is from. If your dad is from Germany and your dad grew up in 1955 and 1930, it's a good chance in your household you practice racism or prejudice type behavior. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being honest. So if I knew that about you, would I not know what to look for or to watch out for? If you do the psychological background or you do the biological background of all these people, all these, and I'm not going to just put it on white folks, I'm going to put it on Hispanics, Asian, because those guys that was right there with George Floyd, that was an Asian, there was a white guy, there was a Hispanic. They were different nationalities. But I guarantee you, if you go look back in their psychological history and their biological history, they have family members that dealt with a time in their life that dealt with oppression, that dealt with prejudice, that dealt with hate. And watch this. What you are seeing is a byproduct of in their offspring. And it slipped through the cracks because we're so anxious to get police officers on the street that we don't even know if they were bullied as a kid. We don't even care to ask our police. Does my police chief did she do a Morris-Briggs test? How do you know she's still not? And I'm not knocking her. I'm with her. I'm not coming after her. But I'm asking a legitimate question. How do we know she's still not suffering from a bad breakup? How do we know she's still not compromised from something that happened in her life as a child? How do we know that? How do you know who you're getting? But yet to work on a 9 to 5, I got to have all these other qualifications. I'm going to read what my sister said. How do we get everyone on the same page? How do we get our young men and women with so much anger to understand how to be rational and strategize before acting instead of reacting? How do we get changes made, requirements? So I'm gonna answer all three of those, sis. I'm really, and that's my line sister. So Shauna Newsom, we're gonna I'm gonna handle this. Her first question was, how do we get everyone on the same page? We got to talk the same language. You can't get people on the same page talking different pages. You understand what I'm saying? We got to get on the same language. We got to get on the same mentality. We cannot have one person want to shoot up the place, one people want to pray, one group of people saying I'm going to stick with the left and right-winged folks because those are my guys. We got to talk the same language. Okay? The same language needs to be love. The same language needs to be peace. The same language needs to be training. The same language needs to be background checks. The same language needs to be psychological evaluations. Those are the same language, but no one wants to talk about that because everybody's upset. Everybody's angry. Everybody wants something to push and to believe in. Everybody wants an agenda. Everybody wants to use this as a way to say, "Oh, I'm a part of the cause. I'm a part of the result. I'm fighting the power." And it's a strategy on business owners. It's a strategy for religious people. It really is. This is a strategy to say, wait, hold on. I want you to come be a part of my organization, or I want you to be a part of what I'm doing because guess what? I'm in the community. It's a strategy. But we don't need that type of strategy right now. We need truth. So we need to be saying the same thing. We need our local government needs to be saying the same thing that the people are saying. We don't need the people to hate the local government. That don't make sense. We don't need the local government to be fearful of the people. We got to get on the same page. That's first of all. We got to speak the same language. That's where structure and strategy on paper comes in. Not this talking. Not everybody wanna sit up here and protest and get in front of a mic and get the cameras out there. Forget all that. Put it on paper. Put your structure and your strategy on paper. Okay? And take it to the government and sit down on table. Listen, let me tell you something. And I'm gonna say this, sis. Curfew will not help you. My mama gave me a curfew all the time that I broke. Every time you try to implement strong hand type law, there's gonna be one that defies it. And and guess what? When they defy it, unfortunately, it now makes them seem like a national hero. I don't know why we like villains. I don't understand why America likes villains. The second thing you mentioned, you said, how do we get our young men and women with so much anger to understand how to be rational and strategize before acting instead of reacting? Because we're not telling them the truth. We got to start telling them the truth. We can't just tell them like, oh, okay, well, you know what, it's racism. Because what that will make them do is hate white people. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? We got to tell them the truth. It's not, it's that what happened, and I hate to tell people this, but I'm a quote Bishop Harper, that he had on his daily talk show. He says, listen, the reason why you have black on black crime is because most of the crime in black on black crime is in black neighborhoods. You got white on white crime, but that's white folks that live in white neighborhoods. You got Hispanic on Hispanic crime. The big thing about it is we got to start telling our youth the truth. We cannot make this one-sided. A lot of the things we teach our youth are one-sided. They're not all the way true. You know how sometimes if you go talk to one person, they'll tell you their version of it, but if you go talk to the other person, they'll tell you their version. But it's only perspective versions. It's not the same thing. The only person that person is saying how they were right and the other person was wrong, and vice versa on the other side. There's nobody that's saying, you know what, I was wrong on that. We got to be honest and tell our children, wait, hold on, we messed up. We handled that completely wrong. We messed up. And no, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that George Floyd messed up. I'm not saying that. He did not deserve that. That was wrong. But if you want to keep them from being angry, you got to speak to them and give initiative to them. You can't allow them to go out without leadership. You can't allow them to go out without agenda. You can't allow them to go out without perspective. You cannot allow them to go out without education and training. We're not educating and training them. We're just telling them how pissed off we are, and they feeding on what we're doing. And you mix that with adolescence and lack of knowledge and immaturity, then you got a time bomb. You understand what I'm saying? So we got to teach them through transparency. We have to teach them with strategy. We got to teach them with systematic approach. We got to teach them with initiative. We got to have an agenda to give to them, because young folks can be on your side. And because they got voices. But we have to utilize their gifts and not exercise their anger and frustration, because all of their anger and frustration is due to lack of knowledge. They got current knowledge, not whole knowledge, because they don't really understand the truth about boycotting and protesting. They don't understand the truth about racism. If they were born in 1980 anything, they don't understand what racism is. So for them to go out there and get all pumped up and aggravated because, oh, a black man got killed by a white man, they don't understand the significance of that. They're feeding off the media. They're feeding off what they see these old folks doing. They're feeding off of that. They don't have agenda. They don't have propaganda. They don't have instruction. They don't have systematic approach and structure. And until we give them that, you're going to see young folks acting a plum D fool. I'm just telling you. All right? And the next thing, you got, how do we get changes made to requirements of public officials locally and nationally? Once again, it all goes down to agenda. It all goes down to strategy. Listen, I don't know a lot of foreign policies or local policies. I don't. But there are people out there that do. There are people that know the rules and regulations. You know how these folks being trained, and you know they're inadequately being trained. You know that. But but you haven't presented one presentation to the police chief. You haven't presented one presentation, one propaganda, one agenda, one structure, one strategy. You haven't presented anything to say, listen, they are improperly trained. We are teaching them about rules of engagement when we should be teaching them about de-escalation and escalation. We should not be teaching them how to be military personnel. We should be teaching them how to be what we paid them to be, which is peace officers. That's what we paid them to be. So we need to train them and grow them and build them and put agenda on them as peace officers, not as military personnel. Rules of engagement is for military personnel. We are not at war with the city. Walking out there with guns and horses and your sirens and shields, and you're walking as a military, like you are in Iraq. And most of them ain't never been to a war in Iraq. You don't know what it is to have to go out there and fight for your life. You don't know what it is to have to shoot a 6-year-old in the head because you know he's carrying a bomb. You don't know what that is. So why are we operating in that type of behavior? Why are you operating like there is a crowd full of people out there and somebody may be a terrorist? These are your own people. You can't operate in rules of engagement with your own local people. So how do we get strategy? Some politicians need to learn to turn against politicians. Don't tell me what happened to George Floyd is wrong and you ain't going to change the agenda. You ain't going to change the structure and the strategy. You just going to go back to Capitol Hill or go back wherever you go and just talk about, all you're talking about is how to de-escalate folks from getting pissed off and tearing your stuff up. That's all you doing. You ain't talking about strategy. You ain't talking about nothing to change this. You talk about it in the midst of people's emotions. That's what our government does. You talk about it in the midst of people's emotions. This was wrong. Royce West did it. He came down there on Friday. You're trying to campaign. You're trying to campaign. Wow, we got snipers up on the building. I bet you some people missed that. You got snipers up on the building with point men. Anybody don't know what that means? Come holler at me. When you got a sniper up there with a point man, that means you have direct targets that you're trying to hit. That's military operation. That's military involvement. That's not peace officer. You don't put snipers to something that's constitutionally correct and say, hey, we keeping the peace. That's rules of engagement. That's a military action. And peace officers should not be operating in military action. But they're trained to. And that's why a traffic ticket can go to somebody dying in the split of a hat, because we're improperly training them, because there is no strategy. You act like you're treating terrorists and not people. Rules of engagement are not for people. They're for terrorists. They're for people that are warring against the government. So listen, guys. Surviving in a divided society. My time is up, guys. But I'm telling you guys, we need some agenda. So next Friday, guys, we're going to be having a roundtable discussion on Daily Manna. And it's going to go for about 2 hours. And I'm going to have about 5 or 6 men and women that's going to be here. And we're going to be talking about issues. And while we're talking about issues, we're going to be writing down some stuff. And we're writing down things that need to change: propaganda, structure, strategy. And we're going to put that in a form. We're going to put that in a form, and we're going to make it into a policy. And what we're going to do is we're going to send that to Eric Johnson. We're going to send that to Governor Abbott. We're going to send that to Renee Hall. We're going to send that to the constable chief, the sheriff's department. We're going to send it to them, and we're going to challenge them to take some of the structures and strategies and training procedures and systematic approaches to your training team and implement it. Because I'm a military person. I was in special operations. I done killed and done been shot. So I know the difference between rules of engagement and escalation and de-escalation rules, okay, and procedures. All right? If a cop walks up to my car with his hand on the gun, that's rules of engagement. That's not de-escalation or escalation. Not for a traffic stop. That's a problem there. You don't talk about that. You train on that. Because when you get in hostile situations, you revert back to your training. So the problem is not that they're not listening to you. The problem is they're improperly trained, because they don't have nothing to fall back on when situation happens. So I need you guys to be with us next week. I'll get a flyer out and everything. But man, me and a couple of my guys, man, some women, we're gonna talk about this thing. And anybody that wants to be a part of it, man, we're gonna be doing this on Facebook Live. We're gonna be doing this for about 2 hours. We're gonna deal with all kinds of issues in the society. We're gonna be in our community, unemployment, racism, how to handle police officers, penal codes, ordinances. We're gonna be talking about all of this stuff so we can educate the people so that we can get better training to our local law enforcement staff. So listen, y'all hang with me, man. I love you guys with the love of the Lord. Remember to uplift Christ wherever you go. Thank you guys on Instagram for staying with me as well. It's my first time doing Daily Man on Instagram, so I love you guys. Thank you so much. But once again, I love you guys with the love of the Lord. Remember to uplift Christ wherever you go, and remember to make the rest of your day the best of your day. Listen, guys, if you'd like to be a blessing to Daily Manna, please, you can do that via Cash App at Dr. Holly Mays, $ Dr. Holly Mays. Once again, $ Dr. Holly Mays. Please make sure that you send that via Cash App. We are trying to get some more strategy structured and be able to bring some really good things to you guys. So make sure that you be a blessing of any kind. It could be $5, $2, 50 cents, whatever it is you guys want to do. But listen, we want to make sure whatever we're doing, we continue to grow and develop the community, man. But I love you guys with the love of the Lord. Remember, once again, to uplift Christ wherever you go. And remember to make the rest of your day the best of your day. God bless you guys. Peace.